So you want to go fast, but you have responsibilities, maybe you need something practical. Well, in an ideal world, you buy a BMW M3. But what if you're on a tighter budget, and perhaps you live near London and you don't want to pay the ULEZ charges? Well, I'm Jack. This is Driven by Data, and today we're going to talk about 5 fast and practical cars that you can pick up for a bargain price of less than £2,000. As always, I'm going to be giving you lots of data and key stats on all 5 of these cars to help you make an informed decision. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're new around here, subscribe if you haven't already. Right, let's get into it. First up, we have the Ford Mondeo ST220. In my opinion, one of the most underrated fast Fords out there. The ST220 was the top of the line model at the time. It came with a 3-litre Duratec V6 engine that output 223 brake horsepower and 210 pound-foot of torque. The engine was actually an early Porsche design before being sold to Ford, and then once they bought it, they passed it to Cosworth for some help with the cylinder heads. Whilst the Fiesta ST and Focus ST get all the attention, this subtle, sensible family rocket ship went fairly under the radar. Perhaps because it sat in a bit of an awkward place. Most people opted for the Focus, but if you had a bit more to spend and you wanted a grown-up saloon car, most people pushed for a BMW with rear-wheel drive and the badge appeal. And also the ST220 was only available as manual, so if you wanted an auto you had to look elsewhere. The ST220 was available in hatchback, saloon or estate versions. The hatch was the most common, possibly because it struck the best balance between practicality and looks. However, the saloon looks more purposeful and everyone loves a fast estate, but be ready to wait longer to find a good one. These sold in low numbers at the time, and Clarkson famously said on Top Gear that they sold less Mondeo ST220s than Aston Martin sold DB9s in the same year. Even fewer are available now, and those that remain will mostly be high milers. Ford did design these cars to last, so it isn't necessarily an issue as long as they've been well maintained. Regular oil changes are important for the chain tensioner, and clunking from the front could indicate worn arms, strut mounts or drop links, and from the rear it could indicate subframe bushes. Rust can always be an issue, so pay particular attention to the bottom of the doors, wheel arches and around the windscreen. Many came with heated seats, but the electrics at this age can be temperamental, so check that they're working. Here is a clean hatch example in the safe black on black colourway. It mentions that it's been well serviced but has a few niggles, but for only $1,200 it could be a bargain if you spent a little bit of money sorting those out. Next up is the car that Ford was competing against with the ST220. It's the E46 BMW 330i. The 330i was the top of the line E46, bar the M3. It sported the famed 3-litre straight-six M54 engine, producing 231 horsepower and 221 pound-foot of torque. Paired with rear-wheel drive and a supposed 50-50 weight distribution, it could be had with a manual or automatic gearbox. It was available in a version to suit pretty much everyone. You could get it in a saloon, an estate, a coupe, a cabriolet, and even this little compact thing. The sport versions came in 2001 with M-Tech suspension, staggered MV alloys, sports interior, black headlining and body kit. However, these weren't branded as M Sport until around 2005, so if you see a Sport, then it's the same thing. You don't have to search long to find people claiming this to be one of the greatest all-round daily drivers ever made. In saloon variation with rear-wheel drive and a manual box, the car had just the right amount of naturally aspirated power for a spirited and enjoyable drive with the comforts that you want like leather and heated seats and cruise control, but without all the complications of the newer models. These cars did suffer badly from rust, so make sure you check the usual places. Wheel arches and sills, etc. But a big thing to watch out for is the cooling system. The water pump will need replacing around 100,000 miles, and it's better to make sure that this job is done as preventative maintenance. But it isn't that simple. Pretty much the entire cooling system is a failure point. You might fix one hose and then another splits, and then you'll notice your temperature gauge is rising. I actually speak from experience. I used to own an E46 coupe and had all manner of issues with the cooling system. The solution is to rebuild the entire cooling system, so you'd want to make sure you've got a good example before investing that amount of money. In the end, I actually sold mine for parts, but that's another story. Other things to watch out for include cracking on the rear subframe mounting points and rear shock mount failures. These are difficult to see without a lift, so it's worth getting a proper inspection if you can. Be sure to check this specific car for ULEZ compliance on the TfL website, but after 2000 the 330i should be fine. Here is one of the most desirable configurations, a 2003 330i Sport Saloon with 120k miles for 2k. There's no description in the ad, so make sure you have a thorough look over before buying something like this. Next up we have something a bit left field, the Saab 9.5 Aero Hot. The Saab 9.5 was introduced for the 1998 model year. The top of the line model was the Aero Hot. Hot stands for High Output Turbo, and this gave the Saab its signature characteristic, incredible mid-range torque and acceleration, generating up to 250 horsepower and 260 pound-foot of torque. All this from a 2.3-litre inline 4-cylinder petrol engine. Clarkson famously quoted that it would accelerate from 30 to 70 miles an hour quicker than the 911 Turbo from the same era. The 9.5 Aero was front-wheel drive, and at the time it was one of the most powerful front-wheel drive cars on sale. It could be had with manual or automatic transmission, although most people opted for auto. It was famed for having extremely comfortable seats, and it had heated and ventilated seats as options, which for its time was extremely impressive. Not many cars had ventilated seats as options. There are a number of Saab quirks which you may find either charming or annoying. Saab would have you believe that you were travelling in a jet plane inspired cabin. The cabin curves around the driver in a somewhat cockpit-like fashion. There's a fasten seatbelt sign which illuminates near the rear view mirror, and a magic night panel button which which dims the instrument panel and the center console while driving at night. The ignition barrel is in the center console rather than in the dash, along with the electric window controls. Saab claimed that they'd noticed injuries from crashes caused by keys on the dash, and they opted to move the keys to reduce that. The early pre-facelift cars generated slightly less power at 230 horsepower. When the first facelift came in 2002, the horsepower was raised from 230 to 250, although the torque remained the same, so you'd only really notice any power difference at the top end of the rev range. The styling tweaks were fairly minor for this facelift, with a different front bumper and a 3-piece grille instead of the 1-piece grille on the original. The 2006 facelift was more noticeable and is often referred to on the forums as the Dame Edna models because of the glitzy chrome surrounding the headlights and the front grille. This facelift saw the horsepower increase again to 260. I'm personally not a fan of this design, however I have seen some people dechrome these areas, which significantly improves the overall look in my opinion. 9.5s were well protected against rust from the factory, although earlier models can start to go on the lower section of the rear wheel arch, just above the sill, so make sure you check this area and also open the boot and check the lower edge. Inside, the LCD screens are known to drop pixels, but can often be fixed with a new ribbon cable, which is a couple of quid on eBay, and you can find handy YouTube tutorials on how to do this. Early cars were known to suffer from oil sludging. Saab noticed this and made some changes from 04 onwards, which gave better crankcase ventilation, and they instructed owners to only use fully synthetic oil. Nonetheless, you may want to get the sump dropped and this looked at. Also watch out for the direct ignition cassette, which was known to cause issues with misfires and could present engine codes. These are fairly easy to replace because they are modular, but it could leave you stranded in the middle of nowhere. Some owners carry a spare one in the boot. These cars certainly have their quirks, and it's worth reading a full buyer's guide if you're considering buying one, but for people willing to do the research and put in a bit of extra effort to address some of the shortcomings, you can end up with a genuinely excellent all-round car with speed, luxury and practicality. And it's even easy to extract more power with just a simple remap. Just Google Noob Tune. Speaking of power, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the nearly 1,000 of you that have watched my first video so far. It's really exceeded all of my expectations. I would just ask one thing, if you haven't already, please subscribe, because I noticed that 99% of you that are watching my content haven't subscribed yet, and it would really help me to grow this channel and keep making more content. That's it, now back to speedy Saabs. Now the problem with these Saabs is that they are quite rare. For example, here is a high mileage example with the owner asking 1750. There's not much else out on the market right now, but they do come up all the time, and you will often see much better buys than this with lower miles for the same or less money. What this does show at least is that these cars are capable of high miles when properly maintained. Moving on to Mercedes, the second generation C-Class was introduced at the turn of the millennium, but development had begun back in 1994, no sooner than Mercedes had released the first generation C-Class. It was made until 2007 with a facelift coming in 2004. The W203 was available in many engine configurations across the various model years. Since we're looking at ULEZ, I'll just cover the petrol ones. There was the C180 2-litre with 127 horsepower. There was the C180 compressor 1.8 supercharged with 141 horsepower. There was the C200 compressor 2-litre supercharged with 161 horsepower. Then in 2002 that was downsized to 1.8 supercharged but retained the same power output. Then there's a 230 compressor with a 2.3-litre supercharged engine producing 194 horsepower, which in 2004 was downsized to a 1.8 but produced a similar 189 horsepower. Now moving to the V6 engines, we have the C240 2.6-litre with 173 horsepower, which was replaced in 2005 by the C230, now 2.5 litres, outputting 201 horsepower. Then there was the C280 3-litre with 228 horsepower and the C320 3.2-litre with 215 horsepower. And then there was the C350 3.5-litre with 268 horsepower. And then finally there was an AMG variant, which was a 3.2-litre V6 C32 AMG with 349 horsepower and a supercharger, which was made until 2004. And then there was a C55 AMG 5.5-litre V8 with 362 horsepower. Whew, that was a lot. But for something fast within our budget, we're going to be looking at the bigger V6 variant, so that narrows it down. Specifically, the C280 is comparable with the other cars in this list, and there are some available in our budget at the time of recording. The W203 C-Class could be had as a saloon, estate, or a sports coupe, which is a bit like the 3 Series compact, but to be honest, I always found the proportions just look a bit wrong. This was the generation of C-Class that was meant to widen the appeal to drivers, rather than just those that wanted a luxury barge. To be honest, they were just trying to steal some of the market share from BMW and drivers that might have preferred the 330i in the past. Mercedes did make some improvements with a more powerful engine range and a sportier, more aerodynamic design with a drag coefficient of just 0.26. However, it certainly wasn't perfect, and the Mercedes was criticised for having vague steering and soft handling compared to the equivalent BMW and Audi offerings. However, if you're looking for something comfortable and quick, then this might tick the box. The C-Class didn't come with a lot of standard, but you did get on-wheel controls, which was kind of a big deal in 2000. There were, however, a good number of options, including even built-in TV. Whilst this wouldn't be much use in 2023, I would probably be looking at a bare minimum for leather as an option. These cars are known to suffer badly from rust, and this was a common issue of pretty much all Mercedes of this era, where their focus on quality dipped as they tried to modernise their designs. I used to have an R170 SLK from the similar era, and arch rust was a big issue for me. Here is a 2005 C280 finished in black with black leather. At a glance, this Mercedes design certainly doesn't look 20 years old, and whilst the exterior looks like it needs a bit of attention in some places, you wouldn't know that from the interior of this car. This particular example has covered 118,000 for just under 2k. And finally, we move on to the Jaguar S-Type, another car that's more associated with luxury rather than speed. However, some of the variants certainly pack a punch. The S-Type was built from 1999 with minor facelifts coming in 2002 and 2004 before being replaced by the XF in 2007. It launched with a choice of either a 3-litre V6 or a 4-litre V8 petrol engine. The 3-litre V6 was actually derived from the same Ford Duratec engine as the Mondeo ST220 that we began this video with. With the 2002 facelift came the entry-level 2.5 V6, and the V8 was upgraded to 4.2 litres with the addition of a supercharged R to the lineup. In 2004, a 2.7 diesel V6 was added also. Spec-wise, in addition to the standard trim, there was a special Equipment SE trim level which added an electric sunroof amongst other things, and both the V6 and V8 could be had in sport variants, which included stiffer suspension, larger front brake discs at 320mm instead of 300, and also 17-inch sport alloys. These handling tweaks mean that the sport is the one to go for if you want a more engaging drive to go with the power. It also featured some cosmetic changes such as being de-chromed and having colour-coded inserts in the bumpers and around the body. The sport models, however, didn't come with cruise control or on-wheel controls as standard, so if these are important to you, you need to make sure that they were spec'd on the car that you're looking at. S-Types are at rock bottom prices right now, so that means within our budget you could opt for either the 3-litre V6 or the V8, and in this instance we're going to be looking at the V8 for the extra power and curb appeal, although to be honest there are fewer around. But here is a lovely looking V8 Sport with the later 4.2 V8 in a desirable British racing green, having covered under 100,000 miles. It has only 2 previous owners and it looks to be in good order, although it is suffering from a sagging headlining. This is a common issue on cars of this era, but it can be solved with some time and effort taken to remove the headlining and re-glue the fabric, or you can take it to an upholsterer. Once sorted, you could have a V8 British icon with 300 horsepower for a bargain price. It's ULEZ compliant too, like all the cars on this list. Now that we've seen all 5 cars in detail, let's dig into the data. When it comes to acceleration, the extra horsepower from the Jaguar's V8 puts it out front at just over 6 seconds. The Saab is the best of the rest, with surprisingly the BMW being the slowest at 7.8 seconds. Turning to top speed again, we see the BMW lagging behind slightly, topping out at 141 miles an hour, where all the other cars reportedly are capable of over 150 miles per hour. Looking at power and torque, we can see that the ST220, C-Class and 3 Series all have very similar profiles, which makes sense since they were built to compete with one another. The Saab's high output turbo puts it further ahead of these cars, however, with increased power and torque from its comparatively small 2.3-litre engine. The V8 S-Type, however, is further ahead with over 300 horsepower and 300 pound-foot of torque. Since all of these cars are large engine pre-2006 cars, there's nothing between them on the road tax at £395 a year all round. Finally, looking at fuel consumption, we see that the S-Type V8 unsurprisingly results in significantly lower MPG than the others, with only 16.5 miles per gallon around town and around 24.6 combined. The second most powerful car, however, actually comes out on top, with the Saab's clever use of turbocharging on the smaller engine, delivering 22.8 miles per gallon around town and 31.7 miles per gallon combined. There is little to choose between the ST220 and the 330i, both with the combined MPG around 28 and the Mercedes slightly higher at 30. So there we go guys, that's 5 fast, practical, ULEZ compliant cars that you can pick up for less than £2,000. Let me know in the comments down below which one you would go for, or if you have a suggestion that wasn't on this list, I'd love to hear it. I personally would probably go for either the Saab for its rarity, power and efficiency, or for the ST220 just for that fun that fast Fords can deliver. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already. The first milestone we're aiming for is 100 subscribers. You can subscribe here, there's another video here, and I will see you in the next one.